Okay, we are hot. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Jurassic Park. No, welcome to Absurd Reality. This show is essentially the journey for myself and for the guests to really explore all the weird and crazy shit that I'm into. You know, the macabre, extraterrestrials, martial arts, comedy, the paranormal. And in order to do this right, I really wanted to have someone come in who could base this show in reality, for lack of a better word, or an absurd reality. And the person that could do this best is my dear and close friend, Dr. Danielle Reese. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me so much, Joe.
What are you a doctor of?
I'm a doctorate of anthropology and cultural studies mainly is what I do, but my discipline is in paranormal research and the occult.
Paranormal research and the occult. That's not a normal, area of interest to start studying when you enter into academia.
It's definitely not.
Did something happen in your past that kind of pushed you in that direction?
It was always something I was really, really into, and I wanted to find a way to adapt that into my collegiate studies, and it worked out being, I was studying world religions for a little while, and it spun off into possession and a bunch of other things, and then it was like, wow, there's this whole world of paranormal stuff, and urban legends and myths, and Santeria and voodoo, and all of this just is still part of anthropology, but it is definitely more absurd.
How did you get into it? Because like when I was in school, and granted I was there for about 5 years and I was partying my face off, but when I was going through the course catalog, I don't recall seeing any of these classes in any of the paperwork or any of the online programs.
Well, when I was starting to study, I was kind of looking for something along my world religions path, and I was going to do a dissertation on possibly polygamy, but that wasn't as exciting as being able to go to Europe and study possession. And so I was like, weighing my options in Utah, Europe, and so kind of it started there. It was always something I was really interested in. It was something that was like becoming very trendy at that point in my life. So why not? Let me go chance this. And I grew up in a household where nothing was off the table. So we definitely believed in different things. Had some instances growing up where, unexplained phenomena, and putting that into my studies kind of just was a no-brainer. It made it seem more interesting. It made it be something I wanted to be studying.
Wow. So when you were studying, you said you started doing, you studied some stuff overseas. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, because I know you went to Italy and you sat in for some exorcisms and stuff like that.
Yep.
Can we dive into one of those stories? I know there's a story with a little girl who was breaking her fingers.
Oh, yeah, that was terrifying.
Had a couple different situations.
Yeah. When I studied overseas, the whole point was for me to decide if things were mentally health-based or possession-based. And it was strictly based on Catholic standards of what would be considered a possession. So you'd have to have several things to be considered a possession, like changing temperatures in rooms, speaking in tongues or other languages that would be unknown to the person. And I went through about 17 of these, and a lot of them you could have said were mentally health originated, and people in small villages didn't know as much about that, so they assumed possession right away. But I did have one with a little girl who was able to do very, very strange things, ended up breaking her fingers just in front of us, and no sign of pain at all, not talking in a child's voice at all, and definitely in an adult's voice, and moving quickly and erratically, and just very, very different things, weird temperatures in rooms, and that was one of the most scary exorcisms I had witnessed.
Can you walk me through that? Like, how does one become involved in an exorcism? Like, what's the process of like, all right, I'm a student now you don't just up and leave and go to Italy and start doing exorcisms. Like, how does that work?
Well, I went there under the rainbow of what I kind of do, and it was mainly to document. It was mainly as a researcher. So I went out there as a researcher, and I got hooked up with the Vatican, and they need researchers to come and document everything, because legally they actually, at this day and age, legally they need people to come in and document what's going on and make sure there's nothing going on that could be illegal, that could harm someone. So that you come in, and it's almost like an internship with possession. Right. So you sit there and you write everything down, you record, you sit very quietly through the whole process, because there's a doctor, there's a priest, and then there's someone who documents, a documentarian, which is ultimately my job. And yeah, that kind of happened when I went over to just study. First, I went over to just study possession in general and hear what the townspeople believed about it, because from an anthropological state, you have to kind of find out what everyone believes in the community. And then it turned into me working with the Catholic Church for a little while just to get more information. And I went over really well out there. They liked me, and so it ended up being a great experience for me for learning.
Were you a part of a program, or did they recruit you?
I was part of a program initially. I was part of a program initially that was going overseas to study, basically to study possession, I guess, to some extent. But when I got out there, there were several of us who spun off in different directions, and I had made so many friends, and I had worked with the village, and I had known so many of the priests, and that they were like, all right, this girl's cool. We'll have her do this documentarian stuff. Other people did other things, helped out in other ways. So it was kind of a group of us. I think there was about 16 of us. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, there's 4 of us who actually went in to document exorcisms, basically.
So I'm assuming that you were, because they didn't recruit you, right? You were just part of the program?
I was part of a program.
Then I would have to assume there's a ton of red tape that you had to, go through, and
oh yeah, signing
NDAs.
all kinds of things saying, I can only say so much.
So regarding this little girl situation, can you talk to me? Like you go to Italy, you get there. How does this case even come up? How does this get put on your desk for you and your team for them to decide, hey, this is what we're going to do today. This is what we're going to study and try to figure out if this is a demonic possession or if this is a mental health disorder.
So she had seen doctors, local doctors, and she had been prescribed medications. And then she had seen her community priest, who had sent it off to another priest, and so on and so forth. So I think she had seen a total of 4 priests before it even got sent further. And then they recommend an exorcism. And for them to recommend an exorcism, there has to be so many signs. There has to be so many recordings of what's gone on. Like, she has to exhibit several signs of acting in beast-like ways and talking in tongues.
What's a beast-like way?
Moving quick, like skittering about, like not moving your body how you normally would.
Okay.
And something that would be very unusual for a little person. Maybe an adult could kind of fake that a bit more, but bending yourself in strange ways as a child is unusual. Like, unless she saw that somewhere and it wasn't a place. It was rural, so not TV and things like that. So to speak other languages that she probably would have never heard was definitely a big sign, unless she heard it from somewhere in the past from a grandparent or something like that. But it was very unusual.
How often do they focus on the beastly movements? Because as a kid, most kids are way more flexible than an adult. So how do they compare the two? Is it just random movements? Is it like what? How do they define that? Because I would think that, if a kid can move in a certain way, most likely a kid's going to move a way that an adult doesn't move.
True. Things that are almost physically impossible, but not quite. So turning your neck in certain ways, your back bending and still being able to walk in certain ways. Like if you were a gymnast, maybe you'd be able to walk with an arched back, like upside down, like in a bridge, and be able to walk around like that if you're a gymnast. But a little kid probably not super fast in that style, like things like that.
Right.
Things that were just unusual. It would seem highly unlikely that you'd be able to do it. Not saying you could never do it, because we have that what is real and what is not for sure. There's no for sure. So it's one of those. It's highly unlikely she could move in these ways. It was highly unlikely that she would just show no sign of pain when she was snapping her little fingers back, and she didn't eat for an extended period of time. She didn't drink for an extended period of time, and these things are things that you wouldn't have the energy to be able to do these things.
Right.
So
the whole breaking of the fingers,
mm-hmm.
she was just literally putting her hand, she was taking her fingers in the other hand and just snapping them like a carrot.
Just snapping her top tendons or her top knuckles of her fingers. Yeah.
What went through your mind when you first saw that?
Oh, that was terrifying. That was absolutely terrifying. And I'm not allowed to say anything, so I just have to sit there and document. And it was definitely a gasping situation.
Jesus Christ. You can't say anything at all.
I can't talk at all.
All right. So let's say you're in a situation and shit hits the fan. And this girl starts crawling off the wall. And we know that's probably not ever going to happen. But let's hypothetically said she starts crawling off the wall. What do you do? Like, can you be like, hey, I need to get the fuck out of here? Like, how do you exit that situation? Or how do you let the priest or somebody else know that you're in a very uncomfortable state?
You're not really supposed to. I suppose if you felt you had to leave, you'd probably try to step out quietly. You're not supposed to attract any attention to yourself. You're not supposed to interact with the person who is supposedly possessed, especially because quite often that person will immediately start interacting with you. And unless you're trained in that background to deal with an exorcism, it draws you in because you are interested in what they have to say. You do want to believe some part of it. And you do want to be like, well, do you know about my dad from when I was a child? And they're going to talk to you about really weird things. And so they don't want you to talk. They don't want you to interact with the person. So I think mostly you would just try to step off really quietly. It's almost hard to feel like you can step off, though. It's almost like you're weirdly frozen because you're so paying so much attention to what's going on because it's scary.
Right. And I'm assuming, well, you don't speak Italian, right?
No.
And this was in Italy, so
No.
everything happened in Italian.
I speak
so you really didn't
restaurant
understand
Spanish and a little bit of French.
So when you were giving your, when you're documenting everything, how do you really know what's going on if you don't speak the language?
Well, luckily the doctor that I was there with, because I was there with a medical doctor, and he would translate a lot for me. So that was helpful because the priest spoke solely in Italian.
Right.
And I kind of know what they're saying. I know the specific prayers that they're using. I know those, and a lot of things are in Latin, and I do know those, but mostly the doctor would like say this is kind of what's going on right now, and he would give me a heads up as to what was happening. And a lot of it just visually you could tell when a tone in a voice changes, when she sounded like a child to when she sounded like just not a child.
Right.
So
when you were there and you said she started speaking, or the other subjects start speaking in a different tongue, is it Latin? Is it Aramaic? What do they normally speak in?
they're looking for Aramaic because that is what the Catholic Church is going to look for most of the time. But it can be anything. It can be any tongue that would be unknown to the person. Usually Latin or Aramaic, or two of the main ones, Greek. But yeah, or tongues, which is just the language of the angels, which a lot of people believe is a made-up thing. It sounds kind of strange. It's not actually a language. It's just a very weird it sounds like a made-up language, basically.
So now you teach at UCLA.
Yes.
What are the programs that you teach there?
I teach a class called Anthropology of Paranormal and the Occult. It's a lot about urban legends in the Americas, a little bit about possession in the Catholic Church, not a ton, about Santeria and Voodoo, so like Brazilian and Caribbean beliefs. It is predominantly what cultures believe about their certain paranormal experiences. So in the U.S., we have things like we have the legends of like the Bloody Mary legends and stuff like that. They all come from somewhere. They all started somewhere.
Right.
And you go to Brazil and the Caribbean, and you have voodoo and Santeria and hoodoo, which is basically a witchcraft / Christianity, because they kind of conglomerated them together. So they're worshiping saints, but also practicing a form of witchcraft where they call on these saints. And so it's talking a lot about that kind of stuff. Yeah, we put a little bit of the possession in there, but that's always a scary one. People don't like talking about demons so much. I studied demonology for a long time, so I like talking about demons, but it's not everyone's favorite.
Is this like a 101 class? Can anyone take this class?
You can take it to satisfy your humanities requirements, so yes.
And so what's the normal track progression for a student if they're interested in these subjects to go, let's say someone's like, I want to become, a professor of the paranormal and the occult. What's the track line for them to go to? Obviously they take this humanities class, and then do they have to go to another school that specializes in this? Or, what do they do?
Well, I think for the most part, since I took the anthropological route, I think you could do demonology, which is a course you can take at many, many colleges, or world religions, and you could start there and kind of move into the field that you're trying to move into if you have a specific, like a lot of people are really into Wicca and things like that, and they want to learn about that and teach about that. But yeah, I was more into ghosts and things. So I kind of tried to mold myself into that. I kind of built myself a course that I wanted to teach and put that out there. I was like, I want to do this, and then I was going to teach a demonology class, and then they came up with this course, and they're like,
wow.
Why don't you teach this class? Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. You said the class really focuses on urban legends. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite urban legend that you like to talk about or teach?
A couple things are fun. People like the ones that they can visualize in their head. Like, have you ever heard the term a dead ringer?
No, yeah, I've heard the term.
A dead ringer.
Where does that come from?
So that comes from a story where a lady was buried in the middle of the night. She was very ill. She died, buried because they're trying to stop the spread of germs. This is the actual story, not the where the terminology comes from. But so she's buried in the middle of the night. Her family mourned and had music up, celebrated her life, crying, rainstorm, all the stuff was happening. But she was gone. Things gone. Then the next day they came up and went out to check on her grave, and things had been they were awry. It was kind of a mess where her grave was. And so they dug her up to see what had gone on, because the top of the casket was skewed and things were just a mess. And so they dug her up, and it turned out there was all the scratch marks on the top of her casket, and you hear these things. And so she was buried, but probably still alive. and probably just maybe comatose to some extent. And the rainstorm had washed away enough of the dirt that it was almost stable that if she was strong enough, she would probably been able to get out, but no. So unfortunately, she still did die, but she died buried. And so that's when they installed a bell on a rope above your grave. So if they'd bury you with it. So if you woke up buried, you could pull this bell. And it was where we got the term dead ringer from.
Shit.
And also dead ringer is the person who looks exactly like somebody else. So if you would come back kind of, from the dead. So we installed those bells, and every graveyard had a bell above your grave. So you could ring in the nights, and that's also when we started having a graveskeeper overnight. The graveyard shift. The graveyard shift would be the guy who would listen overnight in case he had to dig somebody back up who was buried alive.
Oh my God. So, how are you familiar with how often someone actually heard a bell? Like, was it a common occurrence?
No, because once you bury somebody, usually even if they're still slightly alive, they die from lack of air pretty soon.
Right.
Her case, it was probably because of the storm and things still allowed the dirt to move enough that there's still an airflow coming in, because you only have a limited amount of time once you're buried to actually stay alive under there. So.
Wow.
But it did happen on occasion, enough that they actually put in bells.
I know that many years ago you lost your sister, and you guys used to share a room. Can you discuss that experience and how that was for you? And do you think that it had any sort of effect on the route that you chose growing up?
Yeah, for sure. When my sister passed away, and we were very, very, very close, she was very young. She was about 16, and we had a room together. And when she passed away, I was not afraid to stay in a room afterwards. People came to visit us and stay with us afterwards to, celebrate her life. We had her funeral and everything like that. And people didn't want to stay in her room because it felt awkward, and I was fine with it. For some reason, I'm still fine with going to my sister's room. But over her bed, she had one of those really fuzzy blankets that were very popular back then. You bring to sports games and stuff like that. And they are kind of staticky and, normal. But the first night after she was gone, I was rubbing my hands over the blanket, like straightening the bed, and it was just crazy static electricity, like almost star-like sparks just all over the room, and that had never happened before. So I'm like, all right, well, static electricity, I believe in this, so and I would do it several times though, and it just kept doing it, and that eventually it would dissipate. There wouldn't be the static electricity anymore. So after that, I was kind of like, all right, what's going on here? Are you just still hanging out? And the overall feeling of like just. It wasn't a sad feeling or a bad feeling. It was just a feeling of something, like of something else maybe possibly being there. And that did make me start to be curious about, but just what lies beyond, because it just can't be nothing, because no energy is ever lost, right? We take energy meters all the time. So everybody dies, whatnot. People are born, but we don't ever lose energy. So there's never a time where the energy like drops significantly, even after a big accident. So it goes somewhere.
Right.
So I was always interested in that, like the scientific aspect of it, that we never really lose energy. It's always circular. So it always goes somewhere.
Are you familiar with the chronovisor?
Not so much.
So an Italian priest and I want to say physicist, his name was Father Ernetti, built a machine essentially that worked on residual energy. That was things that happened a long time ago. Their energy is still around. And this machine was said to be able to focus on the energy. And it almost looked like a TV screen. And you could see past and future events because energy from the future apparently was still going on. Yeah. It's circular. So yeah, there's a whole mythos regarding this specific machine. So much so that there's apparently that the Vatican's been keeping it a secret.
I would love to play with this machine.
That DARPA actually has one in their hands, and they've used it to look at. I don't want to talk too much about it because I know I'm going to talk about this in another episode. But they've used it to look at what goes on Mars. We apparently have a secret facility on Mars. There's jump programs that go to Mars, but it's all based off this one specific experiment with energy that Father Ernetti started, and you were in Italy, so I assumed maybe somewhere along the lines you would have heard this.
I can use an EMF machine, and that seems like a visual EMF meter of some sort, but it also seems like it can track past energy, which is very cool because I've never played with anything like that. I played with EMF meters all the time. Those are great. You can read the magnetic field in the room, and that's definitely something if you're into something like ghost hunting, it's something you would play with for sure. So that seems kind of like a very evolved version of that, where you can read energy but actually see a trail of it, which that's super interesting. I haven't played with one of those. I don't really know enough to speak on. I think I've heard a little bit, but very little.
I got to do some more research on that, and I'll try to
please
provide
tell
that.
me.
I'll try to provide that to all the millions of people watching. So also, I wanted to touch on, you mentioned that you have a big love for, the ghosts and paranormal.
That's
and
my
you've been on multiple ghost hunts, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me more about those? Or is there one that specifically stands out to you as being either your favorite one, or maybe the creepiest one, or one that you had the most insane experience on?
I like the Whaley House in San Diego. It's one of my favorites. It's not super scary by any means, but there's a lot of activity. Whether or not you bring in devices to measure the activity, you could just go in with nothing and you probably experience something there. It's a old house in San Diego. It's one of the first houses built, and it turned into a courthouse at one point. People were hung there. The daughters of the owner died there in just like tragic accidents. So there's just lots of strange things that happened there. But even when you go in, you're going to feel like a tight, well, not everyone's going to feel this, but like a tight constriction on your neck going up the stairs, and that's bizarre. And later on, you'll write down what's gone on. And it's like, okay, this tight constriction on my neck happened. And when I was in the kitchen, it smelled like everything's closed, but it smelled like cooking apple pie, and just these weird things that you experienced. Then you find out later, like, people were hung over that staircase. Like, that's where the hangings took place, and just random stuff. We shot a lot of photos. I have a picture of a dog on a bed. There was definitely no dogs there. The beds are enclosed with plexiglass still, so you can't get inside.
Oh, wow.
So it was just lots of really weird energy, and I really liked that experience because it wasn't scary so much as it just felt like a presence, but maybe a presence that didn't know that we were there. Kind of a presence that was going on about its own business without knowing that we were there, and I like stuff like that. I don't want anything trying to get me.
Right. When you were there, did you guys bring any equipment with you?
We did.
What'd you bring?
We brought in an EVP machine. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
An EVP machine and an EMF reader. We brought in videotapes. We brought in car batteries.
Did you guys get any EVPs, which is, electronic voice phenomenon?
We got a little bit of EVP. It sounded like children. It sounded like children laughing, which always scares people the most.
Oh, absolutely.
But nothing that I could say was actual words. No one asking for help or anything like that. It just sounds like children laughing, maybe playing on the EVPs. Lots of weird energy with the meters, but also at the same time, it's a very old house in a very old area, and it's in Old Town San Diego, so there's probably a lot going on nearby. So I don't want to ever say specifically that the energy meter is reading anything, because that's always very easy to dispute. You can say, this is probably, like, the ghost people are going to say, yes, this is exactly what's happening. Temperatures were changing. This is a ghost. Other people are going to dispute it, saying, like, well, there's power lines nearby, and there's this and this and this, and so.
So how often, I'm assuming when you guys go on that, you try to debunk most of the stuff that happens?
Yeah, we go in there trying the backwards way. Instead of trying to prove it, we're trying to disprove everything.
Right. How did you link up with these people that you went on these hunts, for lack of a better term, with?
Well, I was sought out initially by a bunch of people that had kind of found me through my work, because I had done a syllabus online for teaching, and it was what was it called? It was called The Skeptic something. It was years ago. I did a syllabus online. And so they had reached out to me through the Skeptics coursework that I was using as my syllabus at the time. And they wanted to ask me questions and ask kind of where my knowledge lied and what I was trying to teach and what I was learning. And it was a group of people that were kind of doing their own thing, more along the line of the ghost hunters thing.
Gotcha.
But there was one guy who was a demonologist and one person who had done paranormal research before in this group. And there's about 10 people in that group. A lot of them were just enthusiasts. And they had hit me up. And it was all stuff I was really interested in, so I would be willing to talk about it. And so we went back and forth and then became friends, like online friends, which back then was unusual because now we do it all the time. But back then it's like, I'm going to meet strangers. Let's hope I don't get killed.
How long ago was this?
I am old. This is probably started over 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Is there any, I know I'm asking this, but I already know the answer. Where is the other place in San Diego that you really want to go to do a hunt on? There's
a place in San Diego, in a place called Elfin Forest. There's a place called Quest Haven where there was an old insane asylum that's gone now.
Oh, so these are two different places.
They're in the same. Quest Haven is inside Elfin Forest.
Gotcha.
So if you ever look it up, guys, Quest Haven in Elfin Forest. But the Quest Haven was where the site of the old insane asylum, which is partially still standing, which is inside Elfin Forest. But all of Elfin Forest is super weird. And you hear all kinds of things about people losing time. And when people get closer to the old insane asylum, just bizarre things happening, hearing things, seeing things. And so it's one of the scarier ones, but I definitely want to research it because I haven't had an opportunity to. And I've looked into a lot of people who have. And it's just one of those things I'm like, I need to do this. I need to see for myself.
We talked about this briefly too, is I have a buddy of mine, Scott, that's totally down to go. We'll grab some cameras. We'll head out there. We'll do some EVPs. We'll do... all the things. We'll take all the proper readings. We'll get the insurance so no one gets hurt, God forbid. But yeah, we want to try to do it like probably around Halloween.
That'd be great.
If you're available.
I would definitely be down.
That'd be fucking dope. I'm excited to do that.
Yeah, I have a little bit of machinery. I have an EVP reader and stuff like that. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is there now? We work in Hollywood, and obviously, the places in Hollywood that we've been a part of have had some incredibly horrible things happen there. A lot of death, a lot of murder.
Yeah, we have a hotel downtown that I'd be interested in looking at, but I'm also scared of that one.
Is there any place that you've worked here that has had a negative impact on you when you were working there?
Negative impact per se. That's a tough.
Like
call.
any place on the boulevard, or
I don't want to say a negative impact. There's definitely been places that I've worked where the energy feels heavier, or if you've been there for a while, it's definitely something you're like, well, maybe we should look into what happened before here. But I don't know. I don't try to tie negativity to it because it's really interesting for me. I kind of like to know about people's pasts and what happened in the past, and so I try to be like, hey, ghosts, we're all friends.
have you had a negative experience when you went to any of these places?
Studying possession was a bit negative for a while. I don't recommend going into anywhere and playing anywhere that you feel the energy is bizarre and playing with like a Ouija board. I feel like that ends up being negative. Weird things happen.
That's another thing I wanted to ask too. So you said Ouija board. This, and maybe you deal with different Ouija boards, but all the ones that I've seen, they're made by Milton Bradley. There's no way that Milton Bradley is making a demonic toy for people to use.
No. A Ouija board is just a device to do what you could probably do without a Ouija board. It's trying to contact lower level energy, which is residual, which is still, that hasn't dissipated, that hasn't gone on. So it's usually not who you want to contact. For all intents and purposes, the things that usually stay back, if you believe in that, are violent spirits that don't want to move on because something bad happened, ones that aren't ready to move on. They're not your grandma.
Right.
They're going to say they're your grandma because they want the attention, but that's not who you're usually going to pick up on anything like a toy like a Ouija board. But also at the same time, a Ouija board is just a communication tool. It doesn't have to be specific. You could probably make your own very easily. It doesn't have to look gothic or like a Milton Bradley made one. It's just, it is.
That's just the ones that the common person's familiar seeing, right?
It's because if you're through another veil, you can't really speak. Supposedly, we can't hear spirits and ghosts speak per se. Maybe you hear them in your mind's eye or you hear them in your mind, but you don't actually hear a voice, like a human voice. They usually work by energy, so energy would be moving something to talk to you as opposed to using a speaking voice. If something has a speaking voice, you should be more concerned. It's probably a demon or something else.
So I'm sure there's a ton of people out there that really want to get into this. How would you point them in the right direction to get their feet wet in terms of getting into this world?
No. There's so much online now, resources and stuff about hauntings, and a lot of places now have been the whole neighborhood, or not the whole neighborhood, the whole city even comes in and like marks some places haunted, like the Whaley House, which I talked about before, is a historical site that's considered haunted. I know we have a hotel up here. Some girl died in the water tower. Lots of weird things happen.
Yeah.
Now it's that they're thinking about considering that one haunted. And so you can look up and find these places that are considered to be haunted, and you can see what's allowed, like the level, like don't break into anywhere. That's a terrible idea. Don't do anything after dark.
Please don't break in anywhere.
Find out what you're allowed to do. Like historical landmarks, a lot of places will let you in. Like Whaley House will let you in. They'll let you in, bringing recorders and things in to do whatnot, as long as you're not bothering the site and anyone else who's visiting it. So I would start small and look up places and look up what people are using, like cheap fun things or like EVP machines, because they don't cost a whole lot. They're basically a form of a tape recorder with static.
Right.
I'd start small. I'd read online and see what other people have done and kind of follow suit. Unless you're trying to do something like teach about it, then I would definitely look into taking a course in something demonology or paranormal research related.
Or your course.
Or my course. Anthropological studies and paranormal and occult, yes.
How big is the I thought it was an earthquake. How big?
Not again.
I hope not. The team in UCLA, the paranormal team in UCLA. How big is that group? Is it a wide group of people, or is it a very small, tight knit group?
Small. It's small. I've got a demonology professor. I've got 2 paranormal researchers. I have me. I'm a professor of anthropology of paranormal and the occult. So I'm just there for factual information. So I'm there for them to bounce this off me, like, oh, can you find out if this person lived here at this time? Because it seems like we have something saying that, Joe Smith lived in this house at this time, but we need to match that up. So I'm kind of more that end of it, where I look into what they've found and I'm like, all right, this is what we're working with. 2 paranormal researchers, demonology professor. We have a couple of people who do science-minded things, who are in the science department, who wouldn't like to be necessarily considered involved in what we do, but they still toy around with it because there's unexplainable things that they want to know more about. So they'll do things with energy readings where we shouldn't have energy readings and try to debunk things for us. So it's a small group, but it's been there for a while.
Do you guys get any backlash from any religious groups on campus?
Yes. When we started teaching my class, we had people come in and try to say, well, we don't want to be paying for a course. It's like about vampires and blah. It's not about vampires. Vampires were just trendy, Vampire Diaries and things. It's teenagers who come to the school. It satisfies your humanities requirement. You're 17. They're like, let's take the vampire class. So we did have some religious folks come in and ask questions about that. And as long as you tell it like it is, as long as you say it's what different cultures believe about these things and not, I'm going to give you a for sure. So as long as it's not put out there as it's a for sure, like there are ghosts, there are witches, but you don't have to assume they have power or don't have power.
Right.
But as long as we don't say without a doubt that these things exist, most people calmed down about it. Initially, they thought that we were going to be teaching their kids about Satan, and
Right.
We talk very little about Satan.
When you say there are witches, obviously you're not talking about the 3 chicks from Hocus Pocus. You're talking about like the Wiccan.
The Wiccan people, Wiccan folks, pagan folks, people who believe in as a religion.
So how does that group differ as a religion then to what most people believe when they think or hear the word witch?
Wiccan is energy-based, earth-based, and so they believe in the elements. They believe in a lot of things is based on manifestation, which everyone started doing. The Secret. It's kind of like The Secret, but with witchcraft.
Right.
So it's almost manifesting what you want to happen. It's spells and crystals, but most things are all beliefs that are coming from the earth or coming from nature, or using moon water in a spell and chanting things over and over, and you're believing in different gods. And so it's definitely not ghosty, and it's not religious in a way where you're praying to one soul god. It's kind of asking nature to do your bidding for you in a way. It's pre-Christianity, so there's a lot of druidism in it and paganism in it. What
do you think the biggest uphill battle is for the paranormal world right now?
Well, it's getting better because there's more. They're talking about aliens and things now on TV. That's just a thing that comes up. We're not hiding facts anymore. So it's getting a little bit better. But for a really long time, it was we don't believe in that because we have heaven and hell and we have earth and this is what we do and this is what we believe in. And so it was kind of just written off as a pseudoscience. And it was hard to get people to talk about it or want to learn about it because they just believed if they believed in it, it was bad or they were going to hell or. It was just something we just wrote off right away, like ghosts aren't real, this isn't real, magic isn't real in any kind of way. And it all just translates to different types of energy, and we're learning more and more different types of energy are real. And so it's kind of fun to say, well, maybe if we look into this, maybe this could also be, maybe this could also be, maybe this could also be. Because some rumors and myths and histories all come from somewhere. It's like ghosts and beliefs and things didn't just pop out of nowhere.
Right.
There's a reason why we kind of believe in them. And so it started way before us. It's not this century. All along we believed in some kind of ghost apparitions because something must have been seen repeatedly at times. Otherwise it would have been written off completely. So they want to believe that, or they don't want to believe. They want us to say, no, there is nothing. We don't believe in anything outside of what we know, but we keep learning and we keep learning more things. Again, aliens now. So.
Right, yeah. What's the industry's viewpoint on all these ghost hunter shows? The ones on Travel Channel.
The ghost hunter shows are hard because they are for monetary profit.
Right.
And they are made to be entertaining. They're made to be shows. And they're made to scare you a little bit. At the same time, some of the people that started them were legit people I know people who have started shows. There's a guy who is a demonology professor who started one of the shows, and so it's hard because I know he came from a place where he wanted to learn, but he did want to turn it into a profit situation.
Right.
And also, he probably wasn't able to teach about it and make money off teaching about it because it is a very small industry to get teaching work in unless it's very specialized.
And I'm sure if nothing happens, people just get incredibly bored and like, fuck this, I'm changing the channel, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah, and also there's that. So you have to have little like instances of like high points and scary things that happen and, night vision and walking around in the dark. And I will tell you this, from ghost hunts that I've been on, you don't have to be in the pitch black. They don't care.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the ghosts aren't like, we only come out when it's completely black. So that's one of the things they do on shows to make it a little bit of a more scare factor, just having the night vision on. Yeah, in the dark you might be more likely to see something, but also your eyes might be more likely to play tricks on you in the dark. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
The time, 3 a.m., has a very distinct meaning in this world.
Yes.
Do you have any information on that you can share with the listeners?
Are we talking about it being like the devil's time?
That
kind of,
or just anything. I just know 3 a.m. is a very specific time code when it comes to paranormal activity or weird, strange shit that goes on in houses and in areas.
We would joke about it being the devil's time because that was something that came up a long, long time ago. I guess 333 because of the opposite. 333 is the opposite of some type of 666 scenario. But I don't believe in that aspect of it. I think after 3 a.m. it's a different, possibly a different level of energy that happens. Yes, after 3 a.m. that's going to be the best time to go study anything. Between 3 and 4 is a great time to go study anything. It just seems like, not that a veil drops at that time to make it easier, but the change in the energy is different. Temperatures are different. Things read different. The world is quiet, so it's easier to get readings on things. It just seems like there's more activity in every sense after 3. But we've used that time period, like I said, the devil's time, since way back when.
Right. And so, yeah, also another thing comes into play is like, does daylight savings have anything, like, is that going to fluctuate it? Like, does that fuck it up at all?
I've never even thought of that. That's a very, very, very good question. I don't know. I don't know if it would. Daylight savings only jumps back and forth about an hour, so I guess it would.
I mean, you're still within that window.
It's still within the window of time. So if you're looking for something at exactly 3, and now 3 has become 4, I don't know. That's a good question. It's a very good question, actually. Now I'm gonna have to look into that.
Was there when you were doing the exorcisms? How much was that in line with, let's say, the movie The Exorcist? How similar was that story?
I didn't see anyone's head spin around.
I hope not.
No, I didn't see anyone. But it is similar in a way where people are restrained. There is a lot of violent, agitated behaviors, and you're being spoken over with holy water, lots of prayers, Maria Satania, which is basically a get back Satan prayer, and a bunch of things. They're trying to find out the name of the demons. They're asking repeatedly, what's your name? Calling out a name for it, because that's what they use to try to talk the demon out of you, basically. Very similar in a lot of ways. And when they'll try to get into your head. So whether or not you believe it's a demon or if it's a person who just believes they're possessed, regardless, the person who believes there's a demon is trying to get in your head, or the demon is trying to get in your head.
Right.
And doing that to the priest and whoever's assisting the priest. And it's similar. It's similar in a lot of ways.
The Exorcist was based on a true story, right? Do you have any information on that?
Very, very little. Very, very little. That's kept mostly under wraps. You can look into it.
I've tried. And it's few and far between. I haven't found much information.
Yeah, you'll find more things about like the Emily Rose exorcism, something more recent, and that's one of the sad stories where it might have been more mental health, and we don't really know in entirety. So, but that one is more widely documented. Way back when the Catholic Church was trying to keep most everything under wraps, and so it was a lot of work to get information about who and what happened. We know that supposedly the person who survived this exorcism lived long after.
Oh, wow.
And so.
When you are watching TV and you're watching movies and this subject comes up, how often you're like, oh, that's bullshit. Like, it doesn't really work like that. Like, or do you see that the TV shows and the movies are pretty, close to reality?
TV shows and movies are doing a good job these days. I think they have so much information to, like, pull from, that they're using a lot of stuff that they're like, okay, we've heard of this. There's a show, I think it's not the movie The Exorcist, but there's a show called The Exorcist, and they use a lot of current stuff. If you ever watched that show, I think Gina Davis is in like the first episode or something like that. And that's a good show to look at because they use literal like word for word documentation from a Catholic church, things you would use when you were talking over someone to complete an exorcism.
So, listen, thank you very much for coming in. I know you're pressed for time, and we want to hang out and have some fun off radio.
Always a good choice.
Always a good choice. We got some lovely, truly drinks and some food, and I know Katie's dying to hang out and stop being quiet in the corner. Thank you very much for coming out again. I love you to death. This was an awesome first episode, and hopefully that the listeners will kind of take this in and see that, we're going to explore all the weird shit, but I'm also trying to give you guys a sense of reality and education when it comes to the things that we're looking into. Because I can blow smoke up everyone's ass, and we can look up the strange shit and just a lot of fake videos out there. And I really want to provide people with the real deal. And you are the real deal. And I love you for coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to hear more about it. I'm sorry if I'm rambly. I haven't been on a podcast ever before.
No, this is perfect. And we'll do more, and we'll talk more about getting out to San Diego and doing the documentary and stuff like that. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. We are out.